relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. People who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm going to jump to the agenda and introduce everyone to Emma Battaglia. She's our MAPC representative from the state. And we're going to go right into the discussion on the Affordable Housing Trust 5-year plan. Emma.
Hey, thank you. Hello. Let me share my screen. Oh, I think you need to enable screen sharing.
Did I do that fast enough?
You should be all set.
Okay, great. All right. All right, can you see this? Can you see the presentation?
No.
No? Oh, okay, weird. Hold on one second. Oh no, I'm like, okay, here we go. Sorry, my computer's being super weird. I have too many screens. I don't know what to do with them. Okay. All right, can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for having me back here. Our main topic for conversation today will be just summarizing what we heard during our stakeholder engagement and going through the scenario alternatives that have been drafted to sort of see what your priorities are and what we want to, either focus on one of them, pull pieces from different ones, and then from there, we'll kind of finalize our budget. So I just wanted to make space, like if we wanted to talk about the warrant article. I'm not sure if that's necessary right now.
It will be for the fall.
It will be for the fall. So, hopefully we could still use the text that we, kind of drafted and update that as is appropriate to secure the funding that we need to carry out this strategic plan. All right. So we facilitated 3 focus group meetings with board and committee volunteers and service providers and housing advocates, and also developers and other real estate professionals. And this was all to sort of understand what the housing need is in Southborough, from sort of all different incomes, but in particular, people who might be experiencing housing insecurity and would benefit from affordable housing. And, we tried to kind of target the conversation around, what are the priorities for this process, kind of what are good ideas, what are constraints that we can try to work through. The first focus group that we held was what we were calling the board and committee focus group. It ended up being a small group discussion, but I think we still had some good conversation, just generally about housing need and also direction for this process. So one of the things that was flagged was the need for housing accessible for seniors and people with disabilities, and just noting that seniors cannot really afford to downsize in Southborough and stay in their community. There's also a need for family housing, and during that conversation, the idea of sort of cottage housing came up as a good option for typologies in that it could fit within neighborhoods and still, accommodate some environmental concerns. It kind of came up that the town, even though, the major residential development process does generate some units, through that inclusionary zoning, it's not as many as, we would want to see that, would happen if a building was fully affordable as opposed to just, that fraction. We had the conversation about how CPC money needs to go into the trust fund account in order to do this work. And in terms of sort of the policy around the inclusionary zoning program, there was talk about how it could make sense to have a payment in lieu option where instead of providing those units, the money could go directly into the trust fund. And that would basically allow the trust fund to carry out its projects, in addition to other CPC funding or, other revenue sources. But, with the caveat that it has to be a good chunk of money, because otherwise, if you're losing out on those affordable units, you want to make sure that the revenue that you're getting in from the developer choosing that option is like actually close to the cost of what it would, take to build that. Some good sites that were mentioned for affordable housing. This is sort of just how they were worded in our conversation. So you probably know more about what these all mean than I do, but these are some just ideas that came up. Obviously, South Union School, South Union Street, a site on Atwood Road where there used to be the water tower, a site off Reservoir Drive, and a site on Parkerville Road. And there was, some conversation about what would it mean to have some housing and more of that typology on Route 9. And lastly, in terms of partnerships, to work with veterans agencies and also to sort of work more with the housing authority and see like what their plans are for the next however many years to really figure out like how the housing trust can fit into that piece. Because a lot of times like they're the ones who end up taking on management of the units. So we obviously want to know what their plans are. We next had a meeting with housing advocates and service providers, and I think Sarah, who joined us for Youth and Family Services. What's her name? Sarah. Okay, cool. She mentioned that, she at Youth and Family Services, she hears a lot from people who need help finding housing in Southborough. And it's really for a whole host of different reasons. Like some people may have been struggling financially for a long time, might have been okay for a while, but then, someone gets sick or someone loses a job. And, another one, which I think really pertains to housing, like the housing that's available in the community, is that someone may have been in a fairly, naturally affordable unit, but then that building might come up for sale, their rent is going to get raised, and then they can't find anything else that's in their budget. And just mentioning that, the wait list for units in Madison Place is years long. So, even though there are some options, it's very few and far between. We talked about how to really have an impact, you need a larger scale project, bigger than 1 or 2 units. But obviously, the main barriers we're dealing with are zoning and sewer. When the representative from EDC who we spoke with talked about, how when they talk to businesses, they have trouble recruiting young talent because, there's not affordable options in the community. So this obviously shows how housing is directly related to economic development. And, you really need like minimum 6 figures, probably more, to be able to afford to buy a house in Southborough today. And, beyond just providing affordable deed restricted housing, we talked about the need for Southborough to just have a more diversified stock of housing. So that means at a range of different incomes, but also different typologies. We talked about how there would be a lot of interest in apartments, from the people who could really kind of benefit from them. And, some of the existing apartment buildings that are in Southborough aren't in the best of shape. So kind of having more updated new units would definitely be a great option. And for the families working with Youth and Family Service, they thought that rentals would probably be the most appropriate, just because with the ownership units, even though you're able to accrue equity, and that's really great, it also just requires a lot more upfront money to be able to make, the down payment. We talked about how there's a stigma around having more density and, trying to figure out how we can communicate to residents that it's okay to have more diversity and density. It shouldn't be viewed negatively, but rather a benefit to the community. That we should be promoting kind of these missing middle typologies. So not necessarily big apartment buildings, but also things that are slightly denser than, the single family typology, which is what is in most of the community, because they can kind of add incremental density, but still fit into existing neighborhoods. So things like accessory dwelling units or 2 and 3 family homes. We talked about the issue with commercial properties sitting vacant instead of being turned over for new development, and that some properties along Route 9 could be a good option because since they're not really in so close to some of the more residential neighborhoods, they might have less community opposition, but we still want to be cognizant of what that commercial to residential shift means for revenue and what impact that would have on the town's finances. So it definitely requires some further analysis. South Union School was again mentioned as a good option for affordable housing. Other potential sites, did I spell Cas right? I'm not sure how it's spelled, but Cas site. A building on Southville that used to be a restaurant that now I think has an insurance agency in it, but isn't at capacity. The town-owned parcel on Atwood, which was mentioned in the last focus group. A site on Newton Street across from Southborough Medical, and potentially West Campus / St. Mark's. We talked about how the town could subsidize additional affordable units in mixed income buildings. So if someone is going through the major residential development program, they're required to provide X number of units, but the housing trust could provide funding to get a couple more units in that building, which might kind of go farther than doing one house at a time. We talked a bit about Habitat for Humanity and that it could be a good option, but not really sure. Just because of their financing model, you still kind of have to give them a lot of money, and there might be other stakeholders that we want to work with. We talked about sort of the need for a larger project, but could the trust sort of continue doing smaller projects while they wait for something larger to come up? But obviously we need money to be able to do that, money and time. One idea that came up to sort of figure out how to generate more units would be how can we help seniors stay in their home, maybe exempt their property taxes in exchange for the unit becoming affordable on its sale. That obviously would require further research. I'm not really sure how often that is done, but obviously what can happen pretty feasibly would be if someone didn't pay their taxes and then that goes into tax title and the town has ownership over it. You could prioritize those properties for affordable housing, and the Affordable Housing Trust sort of has first swipe at that property before it's just sold to recoup the lost taxes. And we also talked about the need for housing programming that would be beneficial. So I know we've all talked as a group sort of about the need for new units, and that really is the priority. But from these folks, there also could be a need for things like rental assistance or down payment assistance. The last focus group meeting we held was with developers and some other folks in the real estate industry. The first thing that we talked about right off the bat was, the main barrier being water and sewer capacity, just because it takes so much time and money to sort of navigate that. So, that can be a turnoff to developers. The max unit capacity for a project on septic with the mix of unit sizes is about 65 units. So, when you kind of cut that out to the number of affordable units, not getting to the place that you might want to be at in terms of, trying to hit that 10% mark on the SHI. We also talked about barrier being kind of resistance from the community to any new housing, and just that kind of, that should say legal fees, not level fees. I was like, what is that? It costs a lot either to go through litigation or to just have a project stay in permitting for a really, really long time. Time is money. So it was just a quote, it sends a message to other developers about investing in the community, because if you don't own the land outright and you end up having to carry it for a long time, that just ends up draining so much of the budget. And then, if you have to spend all those costs to get a project to the finish line, you might have to sort of tack on those costs more to what people will end up paying for those units. So it just ends up being more costly for everyone. These folks definitely mentioned the need to allow for the in lieu payments to help the town build more affordable housing, and that the town should try to invest in a high impact project instead of just a couple units here and there. They they talked about how obviously the cottage type approach is nice, but from a development standpoint, it often doesn't make a lot of sense, and the units end up being still very expensive. So even though they're smaller and they fit in well with the community, a lot of times they're like commanding single family home prices. So it's still something to think about, but the financing piece might be harder. They talked about the importance of having the town staff and elected officials really backing a project, and how that can go a long way to seeing it through, and that developers will pay for certainty. So, some of these sites that are sitting vacant because, someone is just using it as a tax write-off, and they might not be inclined to sell it unless for very high price. A developer is more likely to want to come in and match that price if they know they could do something on it. If they can't, then it's not usually worth the time and effort. They talked about how focusing projects near the major roadways can help to potentially reduce community opposition, and that if a project can be used commercially, like as warehouse space or something else during the carrying time, like due diligence and design and permitting, that removes a lot of the risk. And just the idea that if developers don't have to spend that money, they can instead put that money towards like more public benefits or thoughtful mitigation, like landscaping and screening, to just like make it a better project instead of it just going through this whole process that really drags it out. But they definitely talked about the need to still protect the rural character of Southborough, and that the South Union School project could be a good option for the town and a nonprofit to partner on. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a private developer, just because of like what it would take to make that happen. Just like and the kind of density that they would want to see in order to, have it make sense for them. But for, a nonprofit that is able to access, other sources of funding for affordable units, and for the town to be able to like put in money, that can make a project more feasible. All right, so now I will get into the scenario alternatives. And these really focus on how we can get the Affordable Housing Trust to create new units. They all take a different approach, but none of them really are proposing much in the way of new housing programming, just so, we could focus energy and resources towards adding units. But these scenarios differ in their balance of short and long-term spending priorities, the meeting of immediate needs versus capacity building, reliance on outside partnerships, and also future funding. And I just want to make clear that these all are sort of meant to be fluid and complement each other. So they're not so much like alternatives, but kind of it's like a menu of options. And so you all might like different pieces of them that you want to combine. So I think these things that we're presenting are definitely not set in stone. So, all right, so the first scenario is around this high impact project idea. And so I think the South Union School has just kind of come up so consistently that really makes sense. There might be another parcel that also works, but doing a project like this could have some potential in terms of, the ability to adaptively reuse the existing building, and then also potentially add some other units elsewhere on the sites. In this case, the town would transfer the property to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, who would take on the due diligence work like title survey, environmental assessment, getting it through permitting, if any zoning relief is needed. And then you would essentially seek to hire a developer, you seek to find a developer that kind of fits your needs and goals to then do the site. So generally, these projects end up working for nonprofit developers because if you are bringing the land, that is just like a huge piece of the project. So, if you could bring the land and then maybe some additional funding around like a pre-development loan, or just a loan to support development in general, that can really make those projects come to life. Whereas if a nonprofit has to pay for the land too, it becomes a lot less feasible. So, you really could select a nonprofit or market rate developer. And, depending on what you were looking for, if it's going to be a market rate developer, you're talking about a mixed income building generally, and a nonprofit developer is more likely to have more affordable units. But on your RFP, you could specify what that minimum number of units would have to be affordable. And, you could really kind of set the parameters around what you would want to do. And, these kind of projects work best when you have like a vision. You could do sort of like a visioning process with the community to see like what they want on the site. And then from there, you kind of put an RFP together that reflects that vision. So, this really, I think, is like the kind of process that would be the most bang for your buck. So, all of these numbers are very much estimates, but, if we're thinking, I just put up to 45 units here because I'm thinking about if we were to use the site for compliance with the MBTA guidelines. And so that's 15 units per acre. Your expenditures are pretty low. You're talking maybe $50,000 for the pre-development work. And then if you were to do a community visioning, like hire a consultant to kind of do a community visioning process, and you would work with them to draft the RFP, that's like another 30,000. And then, you could give a loan, the number can really vary. It kind of would depend who you end up working with. And also could vary depending on the number of affordable units that are going to be in it, and also like what level of affordability. So are we talking people who are just under 80% area median income, or are we talking about people who are even lower at like 50%? And so if you want to have some of those more what we call deeply affordable units, you might put in more money here. So, for all of these scenarios, I just sort of assumed like a $500,000 CPA funding allocation over 5 years, thinking like you would ask for about $100,000 a year, but that number can really range depending on how far you want to go and how many projects you would want to take on during the 5-year time. I'm just estimating $500,000 in ARPA funding. I don't know what the final decision has been on that, but I think we mentioned in one of our earlier meetings, if we sort of correspond it with how the state is planning to divvy out that money, I think they're thinking like 20% for affordable housing. So based on Southborough's total amount, that's what it kind of comes out to. And you would get back some of the money from like if you were to give out a loan in terms of the revenue and interest, but probably not a lot of money from that, just because we're talking about a short period of time. The next scenario is what I'm calling direct development, but it's essentially business as usual. So the approach that Shopc and the Affordable Housing Trust have been taking, which is a more slow and steady process to produce new units. It involves finding and purchasing reasonably low cost and unsubsidized properties, which these days are really few and far between, making any necessary renovations, and then marketing the units to low-income households. And I think this, and then I kind of combined it in this direct development because it's what the Affordable Trust has also done in the past by intervening to preserve existing affordable housing units that might have expiring deed restrictions. So here we're talking about a much smaller number of new housing units created. I'm kind of guessing maybe up to 3 based on how long it's taken to make other projects come into fruition. I'd say like at minimum, you're going to spend 500,000 for one property. At minimum, you're going to spend like $500,000 to acquire it. If you're lucky, it could be even higher than that. Another, 20,000 or so on due diligence and legal costs. I just put in $80,000 here. It obviously would depend on what the state of the building is in terms of renovation. And then you have that additional cost to market the units. Here, you're generating a bit more income because you would get the money from either renting or selling the units, but it's definitely not like covering the cost that it takes to produce them. The last scenario I'm mentioning is more of a long-term approach to sort of build up capacity over the next few years to then take on more and kind of higher impact projects after that. So, this would involve building capacity, both in terms of staffing, but also funding reserves, land to implement successful projects when they arise. So this could involve funding a part-time staff support to the Affordable Housing Trust, land banking sites as they become available, building up cash reserves to fund a high impact project later, through the CPA allocations, assuming those happen, and also just kind of building out these partnerships with either other committees or kind of nonprofit organizations, et cetera, to facilitate long-term affordable housing development. One way to sort of get some land could be, as I mentioned earlier, came up during one of the focus group meetings, was that, Affordable Housing Trust and Shopc could support a program by which tax title properties are automatically transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust. And then you could either renovate those units and make them affordable, or you could sell that property and use the funds for other projects. So here, I'm thinking probably is more like 0 units in those 5 years. Say you're spending $50,000 on that part-time staff support, that comes out to about $250,000 over 5 years. And then, if you were to acquire a piece of property, again, probably minimum $500,000. And then if you resale any of that land, you would likely recoup some additional funds. So it does even out a little bit more than the last scenario. So here, this sort of just like combines them all together. And, you can kind of clearly see like how it shakes out in terms of the number of units you're getting and how much you actually have to spend to get it. Because by doing like a project where you partner with an outside entity that is able to bring a lot more funding and, either in cash or just kind of access to credit, that the Affordable Housing Trust money can go a lot farther through those partnerships. And, you're still drawing up revenue, but, you can kind of focus on these bigger projects. This is meeting more of like a short-term need. This would kind of be making the South Union School happen as soon as possible, and trying to kind of meet more of the immediate needs for new units. And this very much would rely on an outside partnership. It wouldn't be able to happen without one, just because of the staffing time to do all the work and the cost. It would be very, very hard, I think, unless like the housing authority were going to want to take it on. But I think even then it would probably be difficult. With the direct development, this I just kind of estimated, like if you created 2 units, you would be spending over $1 million and kind of equaling out your expenditures and revenue. So definitely not carrying as much money into the long run, but still trying to meet more immediate needs, and not thinking as much about how we're going to build up reserves for the long term, or how we're going to create new units now. And this does not really need to rely on other outside partnerships. You certainly could, but it's kind of already in the Affordable Housing Trust wheelhouse, they can make that happen. For capacity building, it definitely requires some money over the long term, but you can kind of think about like if the trust is not ready to embark on a project like the South Union School, like they want more staffing capacity, or they want just more funding to be able to make that project happen, or put it towards the development loan. You could kind of think about building up those reserves in the meanwhile and then executing on that project later. And here I think that would definitely rely on outside partnerships, because that is part of what you would be wanting to do during that time, is to get the most out of relationships with other groups. All right. So that was kind of a lot of information to just put in front of you. So I kind of would like your initial thoughts about the three scenarios. What do you like and dislike? And, are there pieces of different ones that you like that you might want to, you theoretically could do two of them kind of at the same time? Or, I think one thing that will be necessary is to just have like a backup plan in case some kind of funding or something doesn't come through and you need to take a different route. You sort of have another option. And then just some other questions that we hopefully can get to around, what kind of reserves should we be maintaining? Like how quickly do we want to draw down the existing funds that we have? Do we want to focus sort of on one site or a wider geography? And are there any structural changes in town government that might make a scenario that you like more feasible to make happen? So I'll sort of open it up to you, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Anybody on the board? Karina?
Emma, thanks. That was there was a lot of information. Just a couple questions.
Sure.
Under this service focus group on page 11.
Yeah.
Town would subsidize additional affordable units in mixed income buildings. That's the third bullet point there. Is it a feasible concept to, if the town would provide the difference in the market rate cost versus an affordable unit cost to incentivize the developer? Like, have you seen that? So if
I have.
property is okay.
Yep. In the community that I used to work in, we have done that.
So basically, money is allocated to make up the difference to the developer for what he would usually get for the property. And then the town ends up with an affordable unit.
Right. So the town is putting in this. Right.
Yeah.
Because with just the way it's structured right now, it's the developer that has to put in the subsidy to make those units affordable. So if the town is putting in the subsidy for additional units, exactly, the developer is not really losing out on that income. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how it would kind of fix out.
Well, he gets the cost of the affordable rate unit, and then he also gets his profit in the market differential, the market rate differential that the Affordable Housing Trust might put out there, which may be a much faster and easier way, because he is in the business of building and creating a property or a home, whether it's a duplex or whatever, and the town could be kind of on the side saying, okay, it's kind of like a reverse in lieu. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. Okay. And that has definitely been done.
So just food for thought. And then this is a question that was under the recommendations for a scenario 1, high impact project. There was one of the bullets said to transfer property to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I don't know how that would work in Southborough.
Okay,
Are we allowed to, I mean, would the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, are they really I just don't know the answer, be the entity that could accept a property? Because town property is town property.
right,
And
right,
it takes annual town meeting vote, it takes town meeting vote to do anything with town property.
right,
that's-
right.
And for the Shopc to consider under
Yep.
that scenario.
I mean, it might be like the town that continues to own it, but you have an agreement with them to do this work
Yeah, and
until the actual disposal to the developer happens.
Okay. All right.
Karina,
And then,
Karina,
yes,
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. How is, and where's the ownership of the Stockwell Lane units? We have the unit there. We
those,
fixed it up. Affordable House Trust Fund fixed it up and prepped it, all new stuff in it for a new homeowner. They buy it. But that person owns it. But when they go to sell it, that's when the town steps in, because we have.
when they go to sell it, they sell it to another qualified person who qualifies to in income, etc. If they can't find it or the deal falls through, the town has first right of refusal to purchase back the property. But that's all, the rate at which the person who owns it, the affordable unit, sells it is set by the DHCD.
Right.
Okay,
So that's part of that lottery system, correct?
yeah, it's a lottery, or there's another way to do it where it's there's a lottery, and then there's I just can't remember off the top of my head. There's a second way. It's one or the other, and the town picks which way it's going to be put out to advertise.
Okay.
First come, first serve. The other is there's a waiting list, and those
Right.
people get tapped into from that way.
Wouldn't this be the same setup if there was a piece of property? It wouldn't be transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Would they take control of it and set it up the same way as we've set up sales like Stockwell Lane?
Well,
I'm not really
Stockwell
sure
Lane.
how that would work. So
Yeah, it's
So
my
who
understanding-
like held the property during the time that?
developer. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So the developer. So what in? Has
No.
there been
Finish your question first, because I jumped in and gave you misleading direction there.
yeah. So I'm wondering if like there was a property, if that came on the market before you were to sell it as an affordable unit, like who in the town would be holding that land? As like
Well-
for other projects that you've done, or has it always been like the developer had the land?
The developer is required under certain circumstances to provide affordable units as part of his project.
Yeah.
So he sets aside, say, 2 lots, and then before he finishes a certain percentage of the other market rate homes, say 75%, he has to build the affordable units and market them and,
Okay.
and get them sold or built and sold. So the developer and the town only comes into play when, for example, the unit was going to be sold to another qualified candidate for the affordable unit, and it falls through for some reason. Whether
Okay.
there's a legal issue, then the town can jump in and preserve that property.
So has there been a case where the town acquired the property, but like not from a developer, like they bought in?
Yes.
So
Yes, just
who
recently.
held the land during that time?
The town purchased it. So,
And was it like the Board of Selectmen? Like, was there a certain entity that had control over it?
Board of Selectmen.
Okay. So I think that would probably be the case where they could hold it, but the
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust would have an agreement with the selectmen.
The funding came from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but the selectmen are ultimately signers of the P&S and the closing documents.
Yep. Okay, so I would amend this to just clarify that. But essentially it would work the same. The town would hold the land, continue to hold the land while the Affordable Housing Trust did the pre-development work. And then you would seek a developer to kind of come in and achieve what you have put out in your RFP.
Okay. Who, when you talked about that the Affordable Housing Trust or the town could have a loan back as an incentive, who would manage a loan like that? Would the town have to hire somebody? Would a bank do that as part of their service? Like, who manages that loan? Someone has to manage it.
That's a good question. I mean,
It's food for thought. You might not have the
yeah,
answer
yeah,
to that,
yeah.
but it stood out like, well, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I'm not sure, they're the ones who could send out a monthly statement and ensure that the interest was paid and if there's a late fee and all that kind of stuff. So that's something to consider when it gets down into the.
I mean, I know there are ways to loan out money. Like, I would need to look more into kind of
what the
that
detail is.
logistically looks like, but and you also could just give it out as a grant too.
Right, but I think we might need that information to see how other people are setting something up like that, because I don't believe the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and I'm not going to speak for them, but I don't think they're going to want to be in the business of doing loans and having to monitor and maintain and watch what's happening with those.
That's
and
totally.
I think that's an undue burden to put onto them too. So I don't think that's a feasible option. So
do you think it would be feasible to just like give a development grant, if you were working like with a nonprofit, just to, you're giving the land, but if you wanted some more units?
Yeah, I would need to know details on how things like that work, because I would have no idea. And I don't think we've ever done that. So that's something we would need very detailed information on and be able to consider or discuss it. So if you can get us that type of information, Emma, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure.
But you're right, a grant would operate in the same fashion as the subsidizing the difference of an affordable to a market rate for a developer. So if you're willing to pay the difference in the market rate cost, you could also say, okay, we can grant you $50,000 towards this if you make this affordable. It's the same kind of deal. It's the same kind of idea, just a different process.
Right.
I only have 3 more quick questions. John, I know you're waiting. I just want
to that question. I have a question for you on that, because that's why I threw my hand up a long time ago, because it's why you were talking about that. Now, would that be in lieu of a 40B or included with a 40B?
So, it really depends. Like 40B is really just like how it is permitted. So, 40B allows you to get around, like if there's zoning regulations that might be impeding a project from happening, but still, if you were working, say, with like a market rate developer on a 40B, they're only required to do like 20 or 25% of those units as affordable. So if you wanted additional units above that,
an additional above the 25% of the 40B, or would this also be something we offered to somebody that's not doing a 40B to say, hey, just to get another unit of affordable housing, you're not going for the 40B. Would you?
Yeah, either.
It's a great idea, Karina.
Oh, thanks. Just came into my head. Just quickly, last couple of questions. When you talked about tax title properties, I'm not sure, but I thought that years ago we met with town council and the treasurer, and there was discussion about, and Dorian, you may remember this too, and John, tax title, taking property that way has implications because there's a 2-year cycle of some kind where the current homeowner can come back and still settle the debt and take it back. So it's kind of an iffy, like it'd be great, or if it's already gone, if it goes past that 2 years and it's definitely a taking, that's one thing. But to jump on those early, it's a longer time frame to make those happen.
For sure.
Okay. And then
so that's why I would definitely put that in the capacity building bucket. Well, it's why it's in the capacity building bucket, because for that exact reason, that could take time for any of those properties to sort of like actually be ready to be developed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then if you go to your chart where you did the comparison between the scenarios, the blue page,
Sure.
see where I understand. So under capacity building, the second column, housing units produced, 0. Can you just make sense of that to me? Because when you look at the chart, you say, well, what's the purpose? We're not producing anything.
So
Why is that a 0?
sure. So that's sort of reflecting the fact that if you want to do these other things like building up money for a bigger project down the road, acquiring land for a project down the road, you're probably not going to produce new units in the next 5 years. You would produce
Okay.
units after that, but I'm just talking about this 5-year window.
5 years. Okay, that's much clearer. Okay. And then my last comment is there a possibility to use the major residential development incentive? It's always dangerous to say, and change the zoning
Mhm.
to increase that requirement. Like there's nothing that prohibits that. You may not have it may be a legal question, but
You mean
could
like
the
the
town-
percentage, like the 20%?
yeah. Well, no, when you go in our town, if you
Mhm.
do a certain approach and you opt to get a special permit for a major residential development,
Mhm.
and if it's over a certain number of units, there's requirement or incentive, and I can't recall, to have affordable units, a certain number based on how many dwelling units you're creating.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
We could simply go in and say, well, if you're going to use this major residential development, instead of 1 unit per such, you need to have 2 units. And put kind of put the onerous onto the developer, that if he wants to develop in Southborough, he has to expect to include more affordable units than what
Right.
currently is.
So I think you can do that. I think 20% is already pretty high, and it's higher than what a lot of communities are already asking for. And obviously, like, I want as many affordable units as possible. I'm a housing planner, but you have to be careful about walking the line between making development too costly so it doesn't happen at all and you don't get any new units.
Okay.
And so
Mhm.
in that case, I think it might make sense to keep it at 20%, but if the housing trust can come in and subsidize additional units, then it's kind of like a win-win.
Okay. All right, thanks. And I think there is avenue in the code where it says that, if you're planning to do this, it comes before Shopc for review.
Mhm, mhm.
Certain items. We'll have to look at that closer.
Right,
All
right.
just
right.
food for thought.
Am I right? Some of these things definitely could require, some zoning changes.
Yeah, but you're right. It could offset the balance and then you don't have any housing built because they're like, oh, Southborough costs too much. We're going somewhere else.
Exactly,
It's not a
exactly.
balance in their economics.
Exactly.
Uh,
And we
that's
need
the
more
only
housing,
question.
period, right? So obviously we need
Yeah.
more affordable housing, but we need more housing, period.
Right.
So just so I can like kind of take this rough work and formulate it into something more concrete, I kind of want to know, like, are there certain scenarios you like more than others, or like, do you see sort of a combination of things happening? I mean, obviously, like the South Union School just came up so many times, and it just seems like that could be a great opportunity to do a sort of high impact project, but it all kind of comes down to how the trust, just wants to manage its work and, what needs to happen there.
Yeah, I think we're gonna end up with a combination of things, and South Union is coming up a lot because that just became available and more in the forefront for us to take a look at.
Yep.
The impact to that surrounding community definitely has to come under consideration, to just decide we're gonna do a high impact place there, possibly tearing that building down and just building that place up and maxing out that land. I don't think is the best thing to happen to that entire neighborhood. I
Mhm.
actually would not be happy with that if I lived there. So I wouldn't want to do that to them myself. So, we need to have a lot more discussion on that property. We do have a subcommittee that's still studying it. And we're going to look at all the pros and cons of all possibilities with open
Yep.
minds and take a look at it as a board and make a vote. But we're not there yet. So
Okay, so I think we just are phrasing that more generally as a high impact project somewhere, basically saying,
Right.
this is
Yeah.
what you want to do. It's either going to be there or on another site, but like, that's what you want to prioritize.
we need something. We have to
Yeah.
make some inroads somewhere, so.
Okay, so are there things that you like, are there any scenarios that you didn't like, or, you know, anything that we would definitely not want to be doing?
Anybody else have anything to say on the board? John, Jesse, Alex?
I have a question, a very naive one.
Sure.
Are any one of the options more likely to happen? I mean, I would tend to push whichever one might have the least resistance, but that might be a very naive perspective on it.
So I think it's all different, you know, I think probably the path of least resistance is business as usual, right? But that also is very, very slow and steady production. So, you know, I think you definitely could get the community on board with this type of project, but, you know, you have to do a lot. You know, it definitely takes work and, you know, hiring a consultant to get a plan together before the property is ever going to town meeting for disposal, because people are going to want to know like what you're putting on it. So, and then I think the capacity building might not really have a lot of opposition, though I wonder if it might be, if like CPC might be reluctant to like give money, or the town meeting might be more reluctant to give money if like if you're saying like, oh, we're saving up to do something in the future. So I think they all kind of have their pros and cons, and so maybe we do a little bit of each. I don't know.
Well,
But,
that's the purpose kind of this plan, right? It's, I think one of the fundamentals of initiating this strategic plan was in order to, whether it's necessary or not, show the CPC that, you know, Shopc has a plan moving forward, that it's not just a willy-nilly, you know, oh, we want the money.
Right.
It's, here is why, whether or not they have to do it regardless. So
Right.
just food for thought.
Yep.
Okay, Jesse, you have a question?
Yep, I did have a question about the transfer of funds from CPC to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I'm not an attorney, but I did read the Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Community Preservation Act, as it pertains to acquiring and holding real estate using CPC funds. I did not see, and I was hoping maybe you could give some clarity on this. In the statute, I did not see really specific guidance or restrictions on types of real estate. It did, you know, specify owning residential real estate with a deed restriction for affordability. And it did, you know, have some guidelines pertaining to title and the deed restriction. But I didn't see a ton of like restrictions on use of funds or types of properties. So
Right.
I'm kind of wondering, you know, why we've had some difficulty in that area. In your opinion.
Sorry, can you just clarify what you mean? Difficulty
Oh.
in terms of?
Sure. So the Affordable Housing Trust Fund had recently sent a letter.
Oh, sorry. So you just mean like, why is CPC giving a hard time when this should?
Well,
like,
I'm
the law
wondering.
says it should be allowed.
I'm wondering I guess my question is, what am I missing? Because I don't see a legal reason for there to be any issues with this.
There's not a legal reason. The CPC can give money to the housing trust just on a yearly basis. Like that happens in a lot of communities.
Do you have
It doesn't-
any, would you care to opine on why a CPC might put up resistance or need more clarification than we've provided?
Well, I think I think it's a control thing, them wanting to have control over that money. However, that also means that nothing is getting done, right? So I think that's like the crux of our whole problem here.
Right. And maybe if you or Karina could clarify a key point, which I've had some confusion on. If the Affordable Housing Trust wants to acquire a piece of real estate, I'm under the assumption or perhaps faulty impression that they do not need to go to town meeting for approval of an acquisition.
Nope.
As opposed to if the town was desirous of acquiring a property using CPA funds,
Right.
that would need to go to town meeting for approval. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, you can basically, town meeting is saying, we're going to give this money to the Affordable Housing Trust to do what they're going to do. And then it kind of is in your coffers. And that's really what the law, like the housing trust law, is meant to enable. It's like nimble, quick, unencumbered funding to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Jesse, could you
It
just,
just gets to the point of like, if the whole point of having an affordable housing trust is so it's like the more effective option.
And I do appreciate your input on that and your clarification. Thank you. And thanks for your presentation this morning.
Yeah, thanks.
can you just recite the MGL you looked at, Jesse? Was that chapter 44B? What chapter?
Yeah.
It is the Community Preservation Act is Mass General Law 44B.
Okay, got it. I just want to make sure because it's easier to.
Yeah, I'm doing this from memory, but I think it was section 12. Does that sound right?
I don't
I'd
know
have to
off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you give me a minute, I did capture some screenshots on my tablet. And I can pull it up, I think, pretty quick. Let's see here.
Just so that we all know, we're gonna have a quorum issue in 12 minutes. So we need to,
I can,
You want to come back to me?
a little later.
yeah, John, you want to ask your question? We'll come back to Jesse.
Oh, my question is in tandem to what Jesse was talking about with the CPC funds.
Mhm.
I looked into this a while back myself, and this precedent has been set. A lot of just funnel the funds directly to the housing trust or some type of a entity like that. You had asked in one of the slides about a minimum amount.
Mhm.
What are other towns our size, or in your experience, what are they keeping? They're $500,000, $1 million? What are they trying to save up to for future projects? I just know, like, just recently, we had a piece of property down the street from me that was we could have put a duplex on for $240. By the time we even got to go look at it, and it took a while for Southborough. It took a while to close. It was so I don't want to miss opportunities like that. So
I think the minimum amount is probably enough to purchase at least one property when it comes on the market. So honestly, I would say probably at least $1 million you would want.
$1 million.
I think, yeah, because I think, you would probably, I guess, sorry, it doesn't, I would say, between 500,000 and $1 million. Because obviously, like, if you're taking out a loan or something and, you don't necessarily pay upfront, like in cash for the whole property, it might end up being less. But if you wanted to buy a property outright, between 500,000 and $1 million, I would say. But then you also are thinking, like, how long is it going to take to recoup that money? So, it all kind of comes down to like how quickly you want to be able to do projects and act.
I just hate missing opportunities.
Yeah, of course.
That's the worst, when there's opportunities that arise and because of just red tape. You
Yeah.
missed it.
So if I could just interject briefly, it's Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Sections 12,
You were right.
31, and 33. Again, Sections 12, 31, and 33 that are germane to this topic. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing trusts are given a lot of power. Like it's a pretty unique kind of structure that exists in the state. So, but yeah, I mean, going back to the reserves, like in the community where I used to work in, we had an affordable housing trust fund, but we didn't have CPA. So it was only money that was coming in from in lieu payments, and they really weren't that much. So, you know, after many, many years, we'd only accrued like $200,000. And that just, you can't do anything with that. So, you know, until we sort of made policies that could generate more revenue to actually have a workable trust, it's not workable. So I think that's what the minimum reserves ends up coming out to. But I could definitely do a little bit more research on what other communities are sort of trying to keep as their minimum reserve.
That would be appreciated, Emma, because we're having a very difficult time with our CPC group.
Yeah.
We put in a request as we were instructed by them to do it a certain way through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and it was rejected and sent back for more information. And
Yeah.
so we don't have time to be playing these games. The money
Yep.
was voted on by the taxpayers to go into the
Right.
housing buckets, and they are holding all that money. They've been holding money from us since 2009.
Yep.
I mean,
Right. So once you get that money, you'll have about what, like $500,000.
yes,
So yeah,
But
so
they're
I mean,
not
that's a great
releasing the money.
start. Then
they
Yeah.
won't release the money, and there's no reason for them to be holding on to the money. It's sitting
Yeah.
there in an account doing nothing. And in the meantime, it is holding us hostage as a group to try to get affordable housing. We can't.
and in
so
the
it's
meanwhile,
very-
housing is becoming
It's very
more and more
frustrating.
expensive.
Yeah, this is a very frustrating situation and it needs to be rectified through a town meeting. So we are going to discuss going forward with a new warrant article, because in good faith, we pulled our warrant article to correct this, and they did not follow through with what they had promised. And so they've lost my good faith.
Yep.
And I will go forward with my group a different way. So anyway, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions for Emma with where we're at right now with our 5-year strategic planning? Are there any other questions from the board? Not at all. Okay. Emma, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
My
Thank
understanding
you.
is we're going to have 2 more meetings. You're going to meet with our Board of Selectmen and our planning board with this, or what are the next steps?
So in terms of our scope, the plan was just that from this meeting, we essentially would kind of narrow down what we like about the scenarios, and then from there putting together like the final budget and recommendations.
Okay.
So we are only scoped to do 3 meetings total. So this is the second one, and then we would have a third one once the plan is drafted.
Okay, with that final plan, then, is that something that you would like us to ask our planning board to be present for, and our Board of Selectmen, so that they're all privy to what it is that our strategic plan has come up with? Or is that something you want to just?
Well, I wonder if maybe we should do that after, because I think that like I would be giving you all the draft plan, kind of like I would be giving you the plan in draft form, wanting you to then weigh in on it. So I think maybe what we do is just try to set up another, like a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board after the fact, once we're totally done. And say, here, this is what we put together, here's our report, and kind of push it out to the community that way.
They just might have, especially planning board, we have some very incredibly smart members on that board who might have some other ideas or other suggestions that I'd really like to consider, and at least give them an opportunity to speak?
So how about, so I think I could definitely add an additional meeting on. I probably can't do more than that.
Okay.
Because of the reserve, the money we have left. But I can always send you, I mean, I'll first review the draft with Sarah and Karina, and then I think maybe we could send you all the draft like offline, and then you could just over email, like, let us know if you have any edits or anything you want to talk about, kind of funnel that through Sarah. And then we can present kind of that draft to the committee and to the planning board and board of selectmen and see if they have any additional feedback. And then we would finalize the draft from there.
Yeah, most important, I think I'd like our planning board to take a look at it. I really trust several of those members to come up, to really take a hard look at it and give us their honest thoughts. So that would be my personal preference to at least.
Sure. Yeah,
opportunity.
I think let's invite them to our next meeting, and like we could just review the draft offline.
Okay, or maybe it might be easy for them if we did a joint meeting on their time. So I'll talk about it with Karina. And we'll figure out the best scenario for both boards to work together on this.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect.
All
All right, we are going to lose our quorum in literally 5 minutes. So does anybody have anything else for Emma right now until our next get together? No? Okay, Emma, thank you so very much for your time and presentation today. Greatly appreciated. And we will be in touch.
Yes, best of luck with moving forward on this funding issue. I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care. Bye. Okay, could we just take everyone take a look at the minutes that you received in your packet? Do we have any discussion or corrections on the minutes?
No.
From
Make a motion to accept them written.
for March.
Second.
Want to put the date, John?
What was it, March 20?
March 10th.
March 10th.
Oh, you're muted. John, you're muted. John, you're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself, but actually, I make a motion to accept the minutes from March 10th, 2022 as written.
Second.
Okay, Jesse seconded. This is a roll call vote. Jesse?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Alex?
Aye.
And Dorian is aye. So minutes are approved as written. There's no subcommittee update, I assume,
None.
Jesse?
We'll do that next meeting.
Okay, that's what I thought. ARPA, John, you don't have enough time to discuss that right now, so yes.
All right.
All right, we're gonna lose a quorum, so we can't have any more discussions on record right now anyway, so we're.
I thought you said text. I can stay. I moved things around a little
Oh,
bit.
perfect. Go ahead then. Go. Sorry.
Few minutes. So, no. So the ARPA committee, the request we had the ARPA committee had a couple of questions for us. I think I already know the answers to. One of them was the feasibility study for zoning bylaws that negatively impact affordable housing and analysis of town-owned parcels. We've had a bunch of studies already done, and there's a lot of information that covers that in the past. The committee was wondering what other additional information are you hoping to get out of that? If there was anything different. And then I think we should be okay, but if you guys can think of anything on that, if you could let me know. ARPA's meeting tomorrow night on that, but if there's any other information you're looking to get out of it, the town-owned parcels, I think we've already looked at those in the past we've got the housing production plan working. We have the master plan looking at all these things. So I think we're actually okay on that, but I like that, we're putting it out there saying, hey, we want to know that. But if there's any other information that you actually think that's not out there that you'd like, please let me know.
John, I have a question. So Emma had mentioned that to do ARPA, to ask for, what does she have down? Like, is that $500,000?
No.
Is that coming from a different?
No.
Is that coming from a different section, or is that supposed to be coming from this money?
That would be this one. There's a one-time ARPA $3.1 million.
Okay, and do we have a request in for the housing money?
No.
Well, we should have a request. for housing.
Yeah, that wasn't something that when we were having our initial discussions that we came up with, reviewing our previous minutes and our previous meetings, it wasn't something that we were gonna outright ask for.
I didn't think that we could outright ask for money for housing like that,
anything.
but Emma just suggested that it is done.
It is, but I can't guarantee that it'll be passed by either my committee and or the select board. So
Right.
it's worth asking. You have nothing to lose by asking. Because
And
Emma said is a lot of time, the state guidelines is hoping that 20% of it goes towards housing is what Emma said.
Well, I would say to put it to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I wouldn't say not to come to us, but we're having such a hard time with CPC and not getting the housing money that we've been voted on from the taxpayers that, I mean, I don't see an issue to ask for it, since that would afford us an opportunity to do something else or something more on South Union if that comes to fruition or something else becomes available. We need affordable housing in this town for first responders and seniors. And
Do you want to use this number of the 500K? And I'll just let them know tomorrow night's meeting that we might be getting another.
I didn't realize that that was something that we could actually do, and I'm sorry, but I don't think anybody else thought of that either. So, no, I think that we should. We desperately need some help to get some funding.
I'm going to make it as a motion that we vote on, just that way nobody can say we didn't, if that's
Sure.
okay. I'd
That
rather,
makes sense.
so I make a motion to allow me to let John Wood of the ARPA committee, let the ARPA committee know that we were putting in another request for $500,000 of ARPA funds to be transferred into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
For the sole purpose of
For the sole
helping
purpose.
with affordable housing.
Right.
Okay, I'll second it. I can second it, right?
I don't know.
Okay,
I'll second it just. in
okay,
case.
Alex will second it. Okay, okay, this is a roll call vote. Jesse,
Aye.
John,
Ah,
Alex,
Aye.
Dorian is aye. Okay.
okay.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm very sorry, but that struck me. I was like, wait, what?
I think it's a good
Okay.
idea. So the second question was in regards to the funding to support the homeowner's potential one-time needs-based abatement for taxes for residents able to prove hardships, in a nutshell. The questions we had on that was, is Shopc looking to administrate the funds or just administration to happen? Meaning, we put the funds, because I think we had asked for like $70,000. The way I took that, we were hoping to get that put into like the Commission of Trusts that already does something like that now, and that we don't want to handle the administration of all that.
No.
So that was the first question. The second question they had was, do we recommend who we wanted to administrate? So I'm assuming that the Trust Commission. And then the last one was, can this serve other uses, other needs beyond property tax, which that would be covered, people that are having problem making their rent, different things like that in that Trust Commission. So would I be correct in that assumption that we were thinking that the Trust Commission would handle that?
Yes, we wouldn't handle that. So it would have to be, or the Housing Authority or somebody, some other entity, but not us.
Yeah, I think that would, personally, I think that would best fit that Trust Commission.
The
because
Trust Commission, okay.
Valentine and then three other town people handle it, and they already handle that kind of request. I don't know what they have for money in there. I do know, I saw there was an agenda today for that. So I do know that there's been requests, so.
Okay, yeah, no, someone else is better suited than we are to do that,
Okay,
so,
that's what I thought. And that was all I had for questions, that ARPA committee had for questions.
okay.
Absolutely.
And you have the request on there for us to fund a consultant, correct? We had already put in an additional request for $8,500 for a consultant to help us work through all of our things, our 5-year strategic plan,
So I sent that in, John, I sent that in a little while after the fact, but Andrea did, she was in receipt of it, and then she asked for a few, she asked a few clarifying questions, just, who, or what were we hoping to accomplish with having that, support, and I just
With the
let her
consultant.
know.
I didn't see it on the latest worksheet that I was looking at this morning, so I'll make sure that 8,500.
Oh, yeah, she did get it though, because
For a consultant for us.
I only know because she sent me a reply and asked me a few like clarifying questions,
I will
so
bring that one up as well tomorrow night, just to make sure.
thank you.
And it'll be on there.
Okay. Okay, does anybody have any other questions on the ARPA requests that we have? And the new one we just made? Okay, the master plan committee update, we had received all of the documents from Tom. Did anybody have any questions about anything that was sent to them about the master plan on housing?
No.
So he'll discuss it with us at the next meeting, but there's no feedback or anything for him from anybody. Okay, all right. So Sarah, do you want to just send him a note, quick note, and
I
say,
will.
everybody, it looks good.
Yep, they'll be
Okay.
meeting tonight, so I'll let him know.
Okay, and then MBTA Communities letter was sent from the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board to the state in response to the new ruling, the 50 acres issue. I will forward you all a copy of that letter. I did work on it with them, but we hadn't gotten together. I was out of town for 3 weeks. I did not call a meeting during that time for us to vote on sending the letter. So as the chair of Shopc, I did not sign that letter, but I did work on that. We had all discussed that I was going to work on that. I let that fall through the cracks. So my apologies to everyone on that. That's the reason Shopc's name is not on that. So I didn't consider the timeline, the March 31st absolute have to have it in by then. So I didn't even think about it. So my apologies, but I will send you all a copy of the letter that was sent to the state in response to that mess that the state sent us. All right, does anybody have any questions on anything that we discussed today? At
No.
all? No? Okay. Next meeting, Sarah, what are we looking at for the calendar?
It's really up to you all, what makes the most sense.
Okay. Gentlemen, man your calendars. What are you looking at? We're looking in May.
Probably
May
the first
4th?
week.
May 4th. I can't May 11th, but May 4th, May 18th. We probably want to do it early May because town meeting is the 6th.
Just looking at my schedule.
We don't have a warrant article, so we don't have to meet prior to town meeting, but
All right, May 2nd and 5th I have nothing available either one of those days. The 3rd or 4th, I do. The 6th, if it was late, I have an 8 o'clock that should finish by 9.
all right, so you're not available on the 4th.
I could be. I
He
could be
is.
on the 4th.
Okay,
Or
so-
4th.
Third or the fourth, it looks like.
Jesse, are you good on the 4th?
Isn't the
May the
fourth
4th
the
be
same?
with you?
Isn't the fourth the day of town meeting?
No, the
Yes.
6th. Oh, I
No, it's
thought
the
it was the
4th.
6th.
I'm sorry, it's the May 4th and 5th at 6:30.
Yeah, I think we should meet
Ah,
on the 3rd then.
Yeah, makes sense, Jesse.
I'm sorry, I have the town meeting down as May the 6th. No,
No, it's a Friday.
I know, I thought it was weird, but okay. All right, so town meeting is May 4th. All right, so the 3rd, Tuesday, the 3rd, does that work for everyone?
Sure.
Okay,
It does.
okay,
Yeah,
so Shopsy, do you want to do 9 o'clock again, or do you want to go back to 8:30?
Why?
I think
You know,
9.
in my calendar, I just popped up a canceled Shopsy meeting for the 3rd.
Yeah, it wasn't, that was, yeah, that shouldn't, have- just ignore it.
No, it's just in my calendar. So
Yeah, it's good.
so it's
Yeah,
good as
no. There wasn't a canceled meeting. We didn't have a meeting on the 7th.
Be in there, so
Yeah, just ignore it. That's a whole different
you want to do
conversation.
9 o'clock again?
Do you guys want to keep it at 9 o'clock or do you want to go back to 8:30?
8:30 is easier for me.
8:30 is better
I'll
for
go
me.
whatever anybody else, just because that, like right now, trying to get out to see my clients is going to be, it's a little late, but
Okay,
Yeah,
Jesse?
Either is fine.
Okay. I would prefer 8:30 as well, Alex. Sorry. You're
Okay.
overruled. You have to get up early. I'm sorry. All right, so Sarah, if we could get a Zoom room for
sure.
May 3rd at 8:30 for
Okay.
Shopc for our next meeting. I will send you guys all the letter right now that was sent, so
Can
you
we
have it.
clarify the date in May that we're doing the next meeting?
The 3rd, sorry.
May 3rd.
Good. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
May the 4th be with you at
Tuesday,
the town
May the
meeting.
4th.
And we have to hurry up because that weekend I'm going to ride the new Galaxy's Edge.
Ah.
I have a preview. Yay.
all right, I believe I'm all set. I got that in for the 3rd at 8:30. So,
Okay, May 4th, and that is done. Okay, so we're good to go. So, motion to adjourn meeting,
so moved.
Second.
okay? Okay, Jesse seconded. Okay, roll call vote. Alex,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Dorianne is I. Thank you everyone for being here today, and I will be sending you some